Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening.
Queenie appeared to have dressed up specifically for tonight's event. Could she possibly have known that her father would attend the banquet with Bonnie? That had to be the case, and Queenie was here to embarrass her intentionally. How evil of her! Meanwhile, Lena took advantage of the chance to approach Nigel and greeted him. "Hi, Nigel, it's nice to see you again." Nigel responded with a slight nod before turning his head to search for Queenie. At that moment, two young men stood next to her, and they were Brandon's friend's sons. While they were going around greeting the various guests, they happened to notice Queenie. They didn't miss the opportunity to chat with her, and she couldn't be impolite to them because her father was friends with their parents. Nigel happened to catch sight of that scene, and an instantaneous surge of possessive desire swept through his chest. Contrarily, Lena attempted to buy him a drink by calling the waiter and preparing to pass him a glass of wine. However, just as she took the wineglass in her hand, Nigel was nowhere to be found. "Nigel, let's have a..." She looked down at her red wine glass in shame as she watched him leave without saying anything. A flame of resentment flared in her eyes as she caught sight of the girl whom he was approaching. It turned out that the girl he was walking toward was Queenie, and the moment he was close enough to her, the first thing he did was give her a warm embrace around the waist. "You're friends, Queenie?" Nigel inquired naturally. Queenie was slightly embarrassed by his affectionate embrace. Then, she introduced him to the two men but barely knew their last names. "My girlfriend and I have to greet a few elders now. Please excuse us." Nigel excused himself from the two young men and walked away with her in his arms. "My dad is over there. Do you want to say hello?" she asked him. He already knew Brandon was here, so he nodded. Of course. Brandon was conversing with his friends when he suddenly noticed Nigel and beamed with excitement. "You're here, Nigel," he exclaimed. Nigel greeted, "Hello, Mr. Silverstein." Since Nigel had rarely socialized with Brandon's group of friends, many of them were unfamiliar with him. In addition, he maintained a low profile, and no one appeared to have heard of him. "Who is this young boy, Brandon?" "He's my daughter's boyfriend." "What a good-looking boy. Which family is he from?" One of them was curious when he noticed the plutocratic aura Nigel exuded. Brandon replied boastfully, "This hotel belongs to Nigel's family." The hotel was managed by the Manson Group, so could the young man before them be the next in line to succeed as the group's heir apparent? "What a lucky man you are, Brandon. I can't believe your daughter is seeing such an outstanding man. That makes me envious." Soon, Brandon's group of friends started expressing their envy for him. After having such a beautiful daughter, he was able to attract a wealthy son-in-law. What a blessing! Brandon let out a hearty laugh, and Queenie could feel her father's happiness as she sneakily glanced at Nigel. She was thrilled that he could make her father proud. "Please continue with your conversation and have fun. We'll be heading off to greet other guests," Nigel said. "We'll be back in a bit, Mr. Silverstein." "Go on." Brandon nodded. Bonnie, who stood nearby, almost crushed the wineglass that she was holding. She was no longer in the mood to head out tonight in search of a wealthy, eligible bachelor because Queenie had ruined her mood entirely. Meanwhile, Lena rejoined her group of friends. They had all witnessed her futile attempt to initiate a conversation with Nigel, so they began muttering. "What's so good about Queenie? She's not as beautiful as Lena." "Exactly. You can tell she's an escort by looking at her sister. Bonnie is still useful to me." "Don't say that in front of her," Lena warned her friends. She could tell at a glance that Bonnie had a significant setback. Although they shared a family tree, it was clear that she was more like a leaf than her sister, Queenie, who was more like a flower in full bloom. Therefore, it was understandable that Bonnie was upset. Bonnie's demeanor was gloomy as she walked out onto the balcony. Shortly after she had settled in for some peace, a man's voice asked her tentatively from behind, "Nina? Are you Nina?" The mere mention of that name sent shudders through her entire body. Instantaneously, she covered her face with her hands and huffed, "You have the wrong person. I'm not Nina. I'm sorry, Mississippi. You resemble someone whom I know, and I may have mistaken you for her." His words were followed by an awkward pause during which he appeared to collect his thoughts. Then, he sipped the glass of wine he was holding before he walked away. Bonnie waited until the man had left before she lowered her hands. There was frantic worry written all over her face. How could this be? Given that I have undergone such drastic changes to look like her, how can anyone possibly recognize me? It dawned on her that it wouldn't be sensible to stay, so she opened the door from the opposite side, took the elevator to the hall, and then called her father. "Dad, I have something up, so I'll be leaving first," she informed him. Brandon didn't say much to her and allowed her to head home. Meanwhile, she was in a cab with her hands tightly clasped due to her anxiety. She felt as though her deepest secret had been disclosed. Although that person didn't recognize her, it was a sign that her disguise would be uncovered sooner or later. The only person who knew about Bonnie's past was herself, and she vowed never again to bring up the traumatic memories. "No. I'm Bonnie Silverstein. I'm Bonnie Silverstein," she muttered to herself nervously. The driver was startled by her utterance as he turned to ask her, "Miss, are you all right?" "I'm fine," she answered him, albeit a little fiercely. She bit her lower lip to suppress her panic and fear. The past was no longer relevant. From now on, she would be known as Bonnie Silverstein, the Silversteins' second daughter. At the banquet hall, Queenie was introduced to Nigel's group of close friends and acquaintances. Some of them eyed him with envy, wondering where he had gotten his hands on such a beautiful woman. When she was introduced to the group, one of the men couldn't help but stare at her. He was known for being a playboy, and she had piqued his interest tonight. "When Nigel gets tired of her, I'm going to have her all to myself." She sensed the man's presumptuous gaze, and that made her extremely uncomfortable. Then, she reached out, grabbed Nigel's arm, and urged him to leave. Unbeknownst to her, Nigel was also staring at the man. He had done so ever since the man started to give Queenie the eye. Nigel gave a ferocious glare. Then, he gently pried open her hand while commanding her, "Stand here and don't move." Before she could respond, he violently raised his fist and landed a punch in the face of that presumptuous man. There was no time for the man to react before he was knocked to the ground. He tipped over a table before he was soaked in wine and made a general mess. "What are you doing, Nigel Manson?" the man roared as he was helped to his feet by his friend. Queenie was taken aback when she saw that. She covered her mouth as she stared at Nigel, who emanated an aura of menace. Then, she found out he'd gotten into an argument with another man over her. "Do you want to lose your sight? How dare you stare at my woman?" Nigel's handsome features were veiled in a stern expression and his dark orbs glowed with a piercing and frigid radiance. The man's sense of guilt made him holler, "You must be sick, Nigel. What's wrong with me staring at her? Is that against the law?" Nigel clenched his teeth and growled, "I dare you to stare at her again with those beastly eyes." The uproar startled everyone in the banquet hall, and when they saw the two parties fighting, it dawned on them that both came from wealthy families. They did not risk offending or trying to persuade them, so instead, they chose to observe the heated show from the sidelines. Brandon pushed his way through the crowd and inquired anxiously, "What happened, Queenie?" Queenie reached out to grab Nigel's arm and urged him, "Let's go, Nigel." Instantaneously, Nigel transformed into a tamed werewolf. After ensuring her safety, he reached over and stroked the back of her head while he assured her, "Don't be afraid." As the commotion unfolded, Lena watched from a distance. She did not anticipate Nigel, who had maintained a low profile, to fight for Queenie. In addition, he had thrashed another wealthy heir from a well-known company in Averna. Was it worthwhile to stand up for Queenie? The man who had been beaten was called Steve Nolan. He came from a wealthy family and was a member of the same social circle as Nigel. In addition, his vile personality was well known among his peers. It was rumored that he had a penchant for hooking up with women and that he sought only attractive women. As a result, Nigel's anger surfaced almost immediately when Steve looked at Queenie earlier. Even if he had continued staring at Queenie for another 2 seconds, it would be regarded as insulting her. Just you wait, Nigel Manson. We're not done yet. After leaving those words, Steve walked away while he was aided by his friend. Are you all right, Nigel? Lena seized the opportunity, approached him, and asked in a concerned tone. I'm fine, he replied and took Queenie's hand. Let's go. Lena turned around and exhibited an evident expression of disappointment upon seeing their backs. At that moment, she was feeling quite envious of Queenie. She admired Nigel's manliness, but knew she could not claim him as her own. Nigel and Queenie approached Brandon, who was delighted with how Nigel protected his daughter. Nigel, showing your dominance over these unruly people is the right thing to do. You did well. I'll send Queenie back home now, Mr. Silverstein. Feel free to have some more drinks, Nigel said. Okay. I'll leave her with you then. Brandon nodded, relieved that Nigel was with Queenie. As soon as they stepped into the elevator, she reached out to examine his fist. Does it hurt? Why should I feel pain? I regret not kicking him too. Nigel's anger was still raging uncontrollably. How dare Steve try to hit on his woman? As such, he deserved to be beaten. She was relieved that he was protecting her, but she also felt distressed. If the man fought back, Nigel could get hurt. Did I scare you? After noticing that her pretty little face was still tense, he concluded she was terrified. How could she not be? It was the first time in her life that she had witnessed a fight, and her boyfriend's involvement made it even more shocking. Nah, I'm fine. It doesn't hurt to be stared at. Queenie appeared indifferent to the situation. However, the man beside her did not share her sentiment and was not magnanimous. He wrapped his arm around her waist, drew her into his embrace, and stared at her with dark orbs. Who said so? You're my soon-to-be wife. No one else besides me is allowed to look at you. If anyone tries to hit on you, I will make them go blind. In response to Nigel's shocking declaration, Queenie reached out a hand to cover his mouth. Don't break the law because of me. I don't want you to be imprisoned before I marry you. What would I do if that happened? Nigel was speechless at her remark, after which he gave a low chuckle before he finally burst into laughter. Queenie, who was also amused, covered her mouth with her hands as she giggled. The two of them laughed all the way to the elevator, and when they arrived, several guests were waiting outside the door to enter. When they saw a handsome man and a beautiful woman laughing at each other, the guests couldn't contain their laughter. Stop laughing. This is a serious matter. You must listen to me. Queenie glared at him. Nigel suppressed his laughter and nodded. Okay, I'm going to stop laughing now. I will never do anything illegal for your sake. I will keep my promise and marry you. Moreover, I won't let you spend the night alone in the room on our wedding night. Queenie couldn't help but roll her eyes bashfully at him. What are you talking about? You honestly think I don't want you to break the law because we can't be together? That's not what I mean. All I ask is that you always be by my side. After making that statement, her face flushed as she continued walking forward. A black car failed to notice her and nearly collided with her, but Nigel quickly pulled her back to safety. She was so startled that she clung tightly to him. Let's get something to eat before I send you home, he suggested as he held her hand and led her to his car. Meanwhile, Bonnie dashed home and sat on a park bench near the Silverstein residence. She frantically reached for her phone, tapped a few numbers, and anxiously asked, "I'm scared. When I arrived at the banquet earlier today, someone unexpectedly called my actual name. Do you think they recognized me?" Don't worry. You're now the Silverstein family's second daughter. Nobody will doubt you. Do you remember that they looked at the report of your DNA test with their very own eyes? Someone on the other end of the line had a soft, female voice. What if they request a retest? Then, what am I going to do? Bonnie's hands trembled as she clutched the phone in her fearful grip. No, they won't, because they've been looking for you for years, and I know they'll shower you with double the amount of affection to make up for the lost time. So, from now on, avoid overcrowded banquets. All that is required of you is to continue acting as though you are the second daughter in the Silverstein family to eventually obtain half of their assets. You'll feel like a winner when you finally achieve your goals. Do you think I can get 5 billion? Even if you don't have 5 billion, 3 billion is enough to make a fortune. This is a corporation owned by the Silverstein family that has been around for a century, and while I am unsure of their precise value in today's market, the Silverstein family has promised that they will leave you half of any inheritance. Just be patient and wait for the right moment. Are you positive that the Silverstein family's second daughter is no longer alive? What if that girl eventually returns home and reveals her true identity? I will be charged with a crime if my identity is revealed. Don't worry. The Silverstein family's second daughter was only 3 years old when she went missing. How could a 3-year-old child remember who they were? It's likely that she's still living in an orphanage. Furthermore, she is now a common person excluded from high society circles. No matter how hard she tries, she will never know who she really is. The woman on the other end of the line calmly reassured Bonnie. However, you must assure me that you will share the inheritance equally with me once you receive it. Remember that I invested a lot of time and resources to help you. Sure, I know what you're talking about, and I get it. Your generosity to me is something I will never forget. You are like a second parent because you provided me with everything I have right now. Bonnie addressed the person on the other end of the line respectfully. Okay. Get a firm grasp on who you are as the Silverstein's second daughter. Don't try to pull any fast ones, and don't forget who you were before this. How can you possibly compare your life as the second daughter of the Silversteins to someone responsible for entertaining guests? Stop behaving like that if you don't want to return to that terrible life. The other woman sounded resentful, suggesting that she was aware of Bonnie's recent behavior. I didn't do anything. You didn't do anything? Didn't you chase that maid, Courtney, out of the house? You accused her of stealing. What did that maid do to offend you? I only wanted to earn my parents' approval, that's all. You have already been showered with more love and affection than Queenie. Just be grateful for what you have. Don't make things difficult for me and do your best to be Bonnie Silverstein. I got it, Aunt Lisbeth. Bonnie addressed the woman by her name. Don't forget to transfer me the living expenses for this month. All right, Bonnie replied in a hurry. Lisbeth Camden was a childhood friend of Brandon's wife, Maggie Elmhurst. In the past, Lisbeth's life was picture perfect. She married into a wealthy family, and her husband was successful. However, after his death, her son was arrested for gambling debts, and her life went downhill rapidly. She had fallen from her former status as a wealthy wife and was now running a restaurant as her sole source of income. She relied on Bonnie's monthly transfer of $50,000 to cover her living expenses. It was impossible to tell the good and bad of the people one might meet. Unfortunately for Maggie, she made friends with an ambitious and cold, calculative person. Lisbeth was familiar with the Elmhurst family and their lives from a young age. When she went to a nightclub to pay off her son's debts, she met a girl dancing on stage and was completely blown away by that girl's performance. She never expected to run into someone who looked so eerily similar to someone whom she already knew. There was a striking resemblance between the girl on stage and Queenie Silverstein, the eldest daughter of the Silverstein family, by at least 70%, and the two even shared a similar voice. Lisbeth was so fed up with her life's shambles that she suddenly had a bold idea. She wanted the girl to pretend to be the Silverstein family's missing twin daughter. After conversing with that girl, Lisbeth sent her to Hogland, which was well known for its plastic surgery, and had that girl's face reconstructed to look like Queenie's. Following her recovery from the operation, the girl resembled Queenie by 90%. Consequently, Lisbeth fabricated a story for the girl's adoptive parents and took Maggie and her husband to a DNA research facility. Then, she cut a strand of the girl's hair in front of everyone to send off for analysis. The Silverstein couple had no idea Lisbeth had paid bribes to the DNA testing center staff to switch the girl's hair with Queenie's hair she had collected, which resulted in Maggie and Brandon receiving a complete DNA test report. In addition, the girl had the same birthmark on her back shoulder. It made them so happy that they cried tears of joy. They made the snap judgment that she was their long-lost second daughter and embraced her with tears streaming down their faces. Hence, she was known as Bonnie Silverstein. From a nightclub dancer to the second daughter of a century-old family, Bonnie went from being submissive to gradually showing her true colors when she returned to the Silverstein family. She tried to outdo the real Silverstein daughter in the family's affection and eventually planned to force her out. Her initial plan was successful, but she was startled out of her dream this evening when she unexpectedly heard a former patron calling her name. She was shaken to her core by it. Bonnie was worried that if her identity was revealed, everything she currently possessed would be taken away, and she would be forced to return to clubs to earn a living and entertain customers. She transferred funds to Lisbeth, leaving her with approximately $1 million in her account. Moreover, Bonnie could have had more money if she'd asked for it, but she began to feel that the total amount was less significant. However, she had to maintain her stance as the second Silverstein daughter above all else. Afterward, she wiped away her tears before grabbing her bag and returning to Silverstein residence. As soon as she opened the door and stepped inside, she saw Maggie conversing with a maid in the hallway, and she couldn't help but feel apprehensive. "Bonnie, why are you returning so soon? Where's your dad?" Maggie inquired out of curiosity. "Dad is still at the banquet. I was bored, so I came home right away." "Mom, I don't like these banquets because they are too boring. I don't wish to attend these events anymore." Bonnie spoke up on purpose to make it more convenient for her to politely decline their invitation to attend a subsequent banquet. "That's true. That kind of banquet is no fun at all. How about this? I invited some friends to an island over the weekend. You can come with me. Will there be a lot of people?" "Of course. We're going for 2 weeks. There will be a show, a jewelry exhibition, and dinner on a cruise." Maggie couldn't wait to bring her second daughter on that trip. However, Bonnie had been traumatized by crowded places, so she quickly waved her hands and declared, "I don't think I'm coming. I get seasick, so I don't want to go on the cruise." "You should go ahead, though. But I've already signed up for you." "If you get seasick, we can also take a helicopter," Maggie persuaded. "Let's talk about it later. I'm quite exhausted now. I'm going back to my room." The only option Bonnie had was to agree for the time being and pretend she couldn't go when the time came. Maggie likewise found nothing wrong with her daughter. On the contrary, she was looking forward to the opportunity to introduce her daughter to her friends while they were on the trip. Bonnie stood in front of the mirror in the room. After a moment of scanning both directions, she began to regain her composure. The operation that she had undergone turned out to be very successful. Initially, she had about a 60% similar appearance to Queenie, and there weren't many obvious signs that she had undergone extensive plastic surgery, even when she moved her face slightly. If she were to consistently apply her makeup daily, no one would be able to notice how drastically different she appeared when she did not have any makeup on. In addition, her makeup application skills were exceptional, and she has a firm grasp of every facial feature of Queenie. This persona is mine to keep for the rest of time. I am Bonnie Silverstein. Bonnie Silverstein is my name. A pair of determined eyes could be seen in the mirror's reflection. At around 9:30 p.m., Queenie returned home in Nigel's sports car. She had chosen to wear a stunning evening dress in a rose color that, combined with her natural beauty, was enough to make anyone's heart skip a beat. "I'm getting off now." Queenie was hesitant to leave as she looked at the man seated behind the wheel.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.